Welcome back to the deep dive. So I think if you're a leader, or really, if you've ever had a job, you're going to know this feeling, this frustration.
Yeah.
You go to this amazing leadership retreat, right? You learn these incredible tactical skills, better negotiation, clearer communication, a whole new strategic framework, and you feel like fundamentally changed.
You're on fire. You
Yeah.
feel like the best possible version of yourself, and you are so ready to go back and implement all these high-value behaviors.
Exactly. But then you walk back into your office, back into your team, your culture, all the, established rules of engagement.
And it all just falls apart.
Within a week, maybe two, tops. Those new skills suddenly they feel totally incompatible with the system that's already there. They just wither on the vine.
The system rejects the new input. It's like an organ transplant being rejected by the body.
Hmm.
And you, the leader, you just revert to your old habits because that's what the system demands.
And that right there is the curse of what our source material calls fragmented leadership training.
It is. The problem is that we tell leaders they need to acquire this collection of isolated skills. It's like buying a few shiny new tools for an engine that is fundamentally deeply broken.
You're trying to improve the player
Right.
without ever changing the rules of the game they're being forced to play. And the game always wins.
The game always wins.
So our mission for this deep dive is to offer a radical departure from that model. We've been looking at sources that argue leadership isn't a collection of skills at all. It is an integrated operating system. To get sustainable success, you can't just upgrade the driver. You have to install an entirely new OS for the whole machine.
And that means we are talking about a real paradigm shift here.
Yeah.
We're moving away from this dangerous and, frankly, unsustainable idea of the hero leader.
The person who has to be in the middle of everything.
A person who centralizes all control, solves every single crisis personally, and becomes the absolute #1 bottleneck of the entire organization.
And we're moving towards something else entirely. The architect leader.
The architect leader. I love
Yep.
that term. They're the designer. Their job isn't to be the hero, it's to be the expert guide who builds a self-sufficient, high-performance ecosystem.
So that the exceptional results are a consequence of the system's design.
Yes.
Not the leader's personal, exhaustive 24/7 effort.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to unpack over the next 35 minutes or so. We're going to look at the 4 interdependent competencies that form this robust system.
And it's not just about what they are. We really need to understand why their synergy is the key, why they have to work together to create results that actually last, even when the architect isn't in the office.
It's time to install the infrastructure.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's start by diving into that fatal flaw of fragmented leadership. The sources just hammer this point home again and again.
They do.
When a leader learns a new skill, let's say it's empathy, but they go back to a system that's built on centralized top-down control, that empathy just feels fake.
It feels like manipulation. It doesn't feel like a genuine connection because the system's core architecture, all the unspoken rules, the processes, it's still fundamentally authoritarian.
Right.
So if the leader tries to act with empathy, but at the same time, they hold all the decision-making power and they punish even minor failures really severely, the team just sees it as a performance.
Not a transformation.
Not at all. And the behavior just atrophies because the environment is actively hostile to it.
The other great example they use is delegation. Every leader is told delegate more. You have to delegate.
Right. It's the #1 piece of advice.
But if the leader hasn't built the guardrails for quality, what the sources call MDOs, which stands for Mínimos Delimitadores de Operación.
Minimum operating delimiters.
Exactly. If those aren't there, delegation doesn't feel like empowerment. It feels like you're being abandoned.
It becomes abdication. It's that simple.
Right.
The team gets all the responsibility, but they don't have the clear standards or the recognition framework, the PCCs, the puntos de control de calidad.
So what happens?
Quality suffers, of course. The leader, seeing the mess, jumps back in to fix it all themselves, and everyone in the room concludes, see, delegation doesn't work. I have to be the hero. The cycle just reinforces itself.
So the core insight we have to internalize, even before we start talking about structure, is this. Leadership output isn't the sum of its parts. It's the product of their interaction.
That's a great way to put it.
You can't fix the product with a few fragmented software updates. You need a completely new kernel, a new OS.
And that new kernel has to start with the absolute foundation, which is what the sources call competence 1, dominating the philosophy of the human wage, or salario humano.
So before we build a single protocol, before we even talk about strategy, the architect has to change their fundamental philosophy, their core belief system about what their team is actually for.
And this is the radical part. It's a huge shift. The hero leader, by default, sees the team as a tool, a resource you use for achieving results.
So how does the architect leader flip that? What's the new perspective?
They completely flip the causality. The architect leader sees the results, the revenue, the market share, whatever the metric is. They see it as a consequence of having a healthy, motivated, and deeply committed team.
Okay, so their primary mission changes. It's not about maximizing the metric anymore.
Exactly. It shifts to maximizing the team's salario humano, the human wage.
And the human wage is defined as the total sum of all the psychological, emotional, and intellectual rewards someone gets for actively participating in that collective system.
Yes. So the leader's job becomes designing an environment that is so rewarding on a deep human level that incredible productivity becomes the logical and, frankly, the inevitable outcome.
You're focusing on the input that guarantees the output.
Precisely. But this shift, it demands something that is incredibly difficult for most high-achieving leaders. It demands radical humility.
Radical humility. Okay, that sounds intense. What does that actually look like in practice? It's got to be more than just saying, oh, I believe in my team.
Oh, it's much more. It means the leader has to develop the genuine capacity to accept that any problem the team is having, whether it's low morale, a high error rate, internal fighting, it's not a failure of character or motivation or talent in their people.
It's a failure of the system.
It is a verifiable failure of the leader's own system design.
Wow. Okay, so that completely removes the immediate instinct to blame an employee for being lazy or, incompetent. It forces the lens right back onto the manager.
It has to.
So if performance is low, the leader has to ask, what P&I, what protocol, what guardrail, what incentive structure did I fail to put in place that allowed this failure to happen in the first place?
Exactly. The leader stops asking, why is John always late? And they start asking, what does my system lack in terms of transparent standards or fair recognition, the PCCs or accountability audits, that makes being late survivable and maybe even culturally acceptable here.
That mindset shift is everything. It's the only thing that moves the leader from being a blamer to a diagnostician.
And without that radical humility, without a deep commitment to the human wage, the next three competencies we're going to talk about will just be seen as more bureaucracy. They won't stick.
I can see the immediate tension here, though. I mean, if your whole goal is maximizing the human wage, all these psychological rewards, autonomy, belonging, doesn't that fundamentally conflict with the relentless financial demands that are placed on every single leader? How does the architect balance human satisfaction with hitting the quarterly revenue target?
That is a fantastic question, and it really gets to the heart of that short-term versus long-term tension. The hero leader sees it as a zero-sum game.
I can hit the target, but I have to squeeze my own to do it.
Right, I have to sacrifice their wage. The architect leader, on the other hand, sees the human wage as the ultimate long-term ROI. They understand that maximized commitment, loyalty, proactivity, all these components of a high human wage are the only things that truly guarantee high financial performance over time.
So those systems that use fear or intense crunch might get a short-term spike.
They might, but they are fragile, they're unstable, and they experience massive turnover and a huge cost of no quality from all the burnout and mistakes.
So if you manage the human wage correctly, the financial results just become a mirror, a reflection of that healthy ecosystem.
It is the ultimate leading indicator, not the lighting one. And to do that, we have to understand exactly how this human wage is built, which I think brings us to competence number 2.
Right. Let's dig in. The salario humano, the human wage, it's presented as much more than just a fluffy, feel-good concept.
Not at all.
It's a universal framework, a diagnostic tool and a design tool. It's the foundational map for understanding commitment in pretty much any collective environment.
Yes, and that universality is so critical. The sources really stress this point. While your transactional compensation, your salary, your title, public service benefits, that stuff secures your presence. It gets you in the door.
But it doesn't get your heart.
It doesn't get your heart. The human wage is what secures your loyalty, your commitment, and your sustained proactivity. It satisfies those deep universal needs that we all have as human participants totally independent of the context.
And this framework isn't flat. It's structured as a three-tiered hierarchical pyramid.
Mhm.
You have to satisfy the base before the higher levels can even stand. If you try to build level 3 without a rock-solid level 1, you are just building on sand. You're wasting your time.
You are, and it's so important to start with that foundation. Level 1, the base security and justice. This is the primordial requirement. If this foundation is unstable, the entire structure of your organization is fundamentally corrupted from the start.
So what happens when that level fails, when there's no
Yes.
security or justice?
When level 1 fails, it generates two of the most destructive emotions you can have in an organization.
Yeah.
Fear and cynicism.
Okay.
Fear means people spend all their energy just protecting themselves from being humiliated or punished.
Oh.
And cynicism means they believe the rules of the system are applied unfairly, that there's no real meritocracy.
So all that collective energy is just focused on self-preservation.
Exactly. Not on collective contribution.
Can you give us some detailed examples of how a leader actually guarantees security and justice in practice? Let's look across those different contexts.
Sure. In a corporate setting, level 1 is manifest as psychological safety. And this has to be systemic. It can't just be the leader saying it's okay to admit errors.
It has to be baked into the process.
It has to be baked in. The P&Is, the established protocols, must confirm it by offering systemic learning procedures instead of immediate finger-pointing when something goes wrong. And justice also means transparency and recognition and compensation. If promotions seem arbitrary or political, that safety just crumbles.
And what about extending this to the national context? The sources use that as a really powerful mirror.
It's a perfect parallel. Nationally, level 1 is the rule of law and public security. If citizens don't trust the police or the courts, if justice is seen as corrupt or just inconsistently applied, the entire collective system just devolves into chaos and tribalism. All those higher aspirations like economic growth or national unity, they become impossible.
I see the immediate parallel. In a family, that means it has to be an emotional refuge.
Yes, the family must be a safe harbor. Rules have to be clear, consistent, and consistently applied by both parents. If the rules change every day, or if a child is humiliated for making a mistake, that level 1 security is ruptured, and that leads to deep resentment and withdrawal. An architect leader armors this level before they even think about moving up.
Okay, so once that safety is guaranteed, we can ascend to level 2, the body autonomy and purpose. This is the need for agency and meaning.
Right. Because if your team feels safe but they still feel like cogs in a machine, they will never fully commit. And failure here generates apathy and passive obedience.
So they don't rebel.
No, they don't rebel, they just check out. They do the absolute bare minimum necessary to survive, which is this massive hidden cost to any organization.
That sounds like the silent killer of productivity. So how does an architect leader design the system to maximize that sense of autonomy and purpose?
In a corporate environment, this is where you grant genuine autonomy and mastery. The hero leader dictates the how. The architect leader, using P&Is, the protocols, grants the team the authority over the execution of the how.
Which allows them to exercise mastery, to solve problems creatively.
It does. And just as important as purpose and transcendence, the team has to connect their daily tasks to a larger impact. They have to understand who the customer is, who the ultimate beneficiary of their work is.
Let's look at the national scale again. How does level 2 show up there?
Nationally, it demands civil and economic liberties and genuine citizen participation. If the government provides security, level 1, but it removes all agency restricting speech, business formation, political voice, then citizens become passive subjects, not proactive participants. The collective spirit just dies from apathy, even if the economy is stable.
And in the family setting?
In a family, level 2 means guided autonomy. The child or family member is given age-appropriate decision-making power and a sense of significant contribution. If a teenager's chore is constantly undervalued or just immediately redone by a parent,
Oh, that's crushing.
it is. Their sense of purpose and agency is just crushed. They learn that their best effort doesn't even matter.
The warning here is so clear. You cannot ask people to find purpose if they're constantly afraid, which is a level 1 failure, or if they feel like their contribution is irrelevant, which is a level 2 failure. That brings us to the highest level, the summit.
Yes. Level 3, the summit growth and transcendence.
This is the level of long-term loyalty and legacy creation.
It is. It requires the individual to believe that the system isn't just using their talent today, but is actively investing in their future capacity.
Yeah.
That is creating a lasting impact that might even outlive them.
And what are the consequences if the system fails to deliver on this level, on growth and transcendence?
The consequence is the flight of your most ambitious talent. It's that simple. Your high-potential individuals, the ones who are actively seeking challenges and professional evolution, they will inevitably leave for an ecosystem that promises them a better horizon.
Which generates huge turnover costs and bleeds the organization of its future leaders.
Absolutely.
So how do we design for this summit? How do we build it?
In a company, it's about having clear growth and opportunity paths, mentorship programs, educational investments, transparent succession planning, and critically, a sense of community belonging. People need to feel like they're part of a tribe that shares a valuable identity.
I'm thinking about a small, struggling startup, though. They can't afford massive training budgets. So how do they implement growth and opportunity for their, say, 3 employees?
That is a great question, and it's where the architect leader has to get creative. Growth doesn't just mean formal training. It means exposure. It means an expansion of authority.
Sure.
For that startup, it means systematically rotating responsibilities, delegating high-stakes decisions with very clear P&Is, and formalizing peer-to-peer coaching systems where employees are actually forced to teach each other complex skills.
So you're building an internal knowledge multiplier.
You are. And you're satisfying that need for growth without a huge financial expenditure.
And nationally, level 3 is about social mobility and national identity.
Yeah. Does the average citizen believe that the current system will allow their children to live better lives than they did? If the answer is no, then their commitment to the nation is purely transactional. But if they do, and if they share a national identity that provides deep shared meaning, well, that's the foundation of an enduring civilization.
So the architect leader's job is really one of continuous diagnosis.
Constantly. Which pillar of the human wage is weakest today, and what architectural change must I implement to fix it? That's the daily question.
Okay, so we have the philosophy, the deep commitment to the human wage. Now we need the engineering to actually make it function, and to make it function without the leader constantly having to intervene.
Yes.
This brings us to competence 2, forging high-performance teams through zero-dependence architecture.
And this is the most practical, hands-on competency of the 4. The hero leader's daily work is managing exceptions, things that go wrong. The architect leader's daily work is identifying the recurring decisions and building the tools, the P&Is, the protocols to no intervention, to solve those exceptions systematically and autonomously.
So the leader's job literally shifts from solving the problem to designing the rule set that eliminates the recurrence of the problem.
It's the difference between being a firefighter and being a city planner. If the team is constantly asking, hey, should we prioritize client A or client B? The hero leader jumps in and makes the decision.
And they feel useful. They feel important.
They do. But the architect leader stops and says, wait a minute, that's a recurring decision. We need P&I P002, the priority matrix protocol. And their architect spends their time codifying that protocol, training the team on it, and then they step away. They let the P&I make the decision automatically the next 100 times it comes up.
That is the core mechanism for zero dependence. The leader defines the what and the why, often collaboratively with the team, setting that strategic direction. But the team gets the authority and the tools, the P&Is, to define and execute the how.
And this is how the leader is finally freed up for real strategic work. If 80% of your daily operational decisions are managed by P&Is, the leader's intervention index plummets, and they can finally focus on truly high-value tasks, innovation, foresight, more system design.
This zero-dependence architecture, it sounds fantastic on paper, but if you really give people that much room to operate, you're inevitably creating friction, right? Empowered people, even guided by protocols they help design, they're still going to disagree on strategy, on interpretation, on how to allocate resources.
Absolutely. Friction is the inevitable and I would say desirable byproduct of genuine autonomy. And if the leader implements competence 2, the architecture, successfully, they immediately create the necessity for competence 3, mastering constructive conflict.
The system is going to create heat.
It will. And the leader has to make sure that heat is harnessed to run the engine, not burn down the whole house.
And this is where the contrast between the hero and the architect just becomes so visible. The hero leader is terrified of conflict. They see it as a sign of team failure, and they actively try to silence dissent to maintain some kind of artificial peace.
Or a false consensus. And in doing so, they suppress the single greatest source of innovation they have. The elite leader sees conflict as the motor. They actually change the definition of conflict in the team's mind.
How so?
They shift it from being a personal threat to being a tool for intellectual exploration. They know deep down that the best decisions rarely emerge from smooth, easy agreement. They emerge from the tension of diverse, high-quality ideas clashing safely with each other.
So the leader's key job here isn't to resolve the debate themselves,
No.
but to create and maintain a robust, psychologically safe container for that debate to happen. What does that container actually look like?
It means establishing really clear rules of engagement for debate. For example, a leader might mandate that every single strategic presentation must include a section titled "The Three Strongest Arguments Against This Plan and Our Proposed Mitigations."
You're sort of forcing them to think like the opposition.
You are, and they actively protect the dissenter. If someone presents a counter-argument that challenges the status quo, the leader have to immediately shield that person from any kind of personal attack.
They're role modeling that disagreement is a service to the organization. It's not an act of betrayal.
Exactly. They actively solicit the opposition. They'll ask questions like, what is the argument we haven't heard yet? Or, let's assume this idea fails completely in 6 months. Who can tell me why it failed?
And that teaches the team to debate the idea or the PNI or the data with real rigor and to completely separate the intellectual process from their personal identity.
It's high-stakes intellectual sparring, and it's made safe by the constant reinforcement of level 1 of the human wage. Psychological safety.
Okay, let's get practical. Let's move to the point where this entire system meets its biggest psychological barrier. We've got this case study of Miguel Angel, a leader who he gets the philosophy, he understands the need for PNIs, but he's paralyzed.
He's stuck.
He's stuck by the fear that delegating control will just result in his staff abusing that trust. He's worried the change will be treated as just another obligation, leading to chaos, and he'll have to step in even more.
This is the anxiety of every single transitioning leader. They mistake the transition from fragile personal control, which relies on their own exhaustion and constant presence, to robust systemic control, which relies on architectural design.
His fear is legitimate.
It is, but it is ultimately a self-imposed limitation.
And the brutal truth that the source is present is that his fear isn't really caused by his people being untrustworthy. It's caused by the fact that he hasn't designed a system yet that makes abuse impossible or undesirable or at the very least immediately visible.
That is the pivot. The leader has to stop asking this existential question, how can I trust my people? The correct architect question is this: what system can I design that allows me to delegate authority with absolute objective confidence, relying entirely on the undeniable validity of the guardrails I have built?
So trust becomes systemic. It's not personal anymore. Okay, so let's first diagnose the current cost of his fear. If Miguel Angel is bottlenecking every decision because he's terrified of losing control, what pillars of the human wage is he already rupturing before he even tries to implement the new architecture?
Well, his anxiety creates this toxic environment of palpable distrust. And that immediately ruptures level 1, psychological safety. The team senses his fear, which translates to them fearing his judgment. They get defense.
But what about level 2?
Second, by constantly requiring his personal approval for everything, he is completely blocking level 2, autonomy and mastery. He is signaling non-verbally that their judgment is insufficient, and this guarantees they never take real ownership or develop the decision-making muscles they need.
So he creates this vicious cycle. He doesn't delegate because he thinks they lack judgment.
And they lack judgment because he never lets them make a real decision.
Right.
Precisely. And this fear generates significant operational waste, what are known in lean methodologies as MUES. We see 2 major wastes here. First, muda de espera, or wait waste.
Everyone is just waiting around.
Everyone is bottlenecked, waiting for Miguel Angel to sign off on something, or review something, or just make a decision. This absolutely cripples the organization's speed and velocity. Time is literally being burned, waiting for the hero to intervene.
And the second type of waste?
The second is arguably more damaging, muda de talento no utilizado, or unused talent waste. Miguel Angel has expensive, capable people on his payroll whose intellectual capacity is being wasted because he refuses to let them take true ownership. This is a massive ongoing cost, the cost of not maximizing the human potential you already pay for.
So his failure is fundamentally rooted in competence 2, architecture, because he hasn't built the PNIs.
And competence 4, measurement, because he doesn't have an objective system to audit behavior, so he's forced to default to constant, exhausting personal supervision.
That's the diagnosis.
Yeah.
What's the prescription? The solution is to design freedom, but with guardrails.
Freedom with guardrails. You don't just jump straight to delegating the hardest, most complex problems. You have to start small.
With the triage action, the proto-PNI, How does that immediately shift the perception of control?
It's a proof of concept. The leader selects a low-risk, frequent operational decision, something like the order of execution for a secondary task, and he delegates it using a verbal P&I structure. The key is to define the boundaries, the MDOs, right up front.
So what would he say?
You might say something like, team, from now on, you decide the X. The only two rules, the only MDOs are, one, it must not affect the final delivery deadline, and two, the chosen order must be agreed upon unanimously by the three of you. You have total authority. You don't need my approval.
That immediately puts the control into the rules, into the MDOs, not into the leader's physical presence. The team now owns the system for that specific decision.
And it works. But to conquer Miguel Angel's chronic anxiety, we need what the source calls the armored P&I. Let's look at the example they give, P&I C001, the Protocol for Delivery Quality. This is how a leader delegates quality assurance with absolute confidence.
Walk us through the components of this armored protocol. How does the system ensure quality without the leader having to intervene personally?
Okay, so the MBOs, the minimum operating delimiters, they are the shield. For P&I C001, the MDOs might dictate that no critical task can be officially delivered to a client until two conditions are met.
Two non-negotiable conditions.
Non-negotiable. First, a rigorous checklist de éxito, a success checklist, has to be completed. And second, the task has to receive final approval from a par revisor, a peer reviewer from within the team.
And the brilliant part is the outsourcing. Quality control is now the team's collective systemic responsibility. It's not the leader's personal burden anymore.
The leader has built a mechanism that filters errors before they even reach the final approval stage. They are no longer the filter themselves. This is zero dependence in action.
Okay, but how do you make sure people take that seriously?
That's where we integrate the PCC, the Punto de Control de Calidad, the positive incentive. We have to reward collective ownership. So for P&I 001, the PCC is a monthly award, not for the person with the highest output, but for the best quality coach.
So it goes to the peer reviewer who consistently gave the most constructive, high-value feedback that actually prevented errors.
Exactly. And that ties directly back to Competence 3, Conflict, and Competence 1, the human wage, specifically growth and belonging. You're rewarding the difficult act of constructively challenging a peer's work. You're incentivizing the team to police and improve the quality of the system itself.
Okay, but Miguel Angel still needs his new form of control. He needs to know it's working.
And that's the final piece, the valvula d'escape, the automatic alarm. This is how he delegates authority while still maintaining objective accountability.
How does the architect leader use that escape valve to audit the system, not supervise the people?
He defines his new role very clearly. He says, my job is no longer to check every single delivery. From now on, I will randomly audit 20% of all finished deliveries after the checklist and peer review are complete. The escape valve triggers if that audit fails.
What happens then?
He says, if I find a critical, non-negotiable error that slipped past both the checklist and the peer review, P&I C001 is immediately suspended. We don't blame the person who made the error. We immediately convene a mandatory lessons learned session, which is P&I E001, to redesign the checklist or improve the peer review process.
That is such a profound shift. The discovery of an error is not a moment for punishment. It's a data point indicating a systemic failure. The leader acts as the quality auditor of the protocol, not the supervisor of the employee.
And that is exactly how Miguel Angel moves from fragile personal control to robust systemic control. He can delegate with confidence because he knows the guards are in place, the incentives reward responsibility, and if the system fails, he knows exactly which part of the system needs fixing.
We've now established the philosophy, the architecture, and the conflict engine. This brings us to the final and I think indispensable competence. Competence for installing systems of improvement and control.
You have to close the loop.
You do, because architecture without measurement is just speculation. You have to convert leadership into a data-driven discipline.
If the architect leader doesn't measure the health of their ecosystem, the whole system can just decay slowly and invisibly. The key tool here is the balanced scorecard, the BSC of the architect leader. It forces the leader to look beyond the standard financial metrics and measure the actual ROI of their system design.
And the BSC gives you that 360-degree view, measuring the 4 key perspectives of the leadership business. Let's start with the one that, still matters most to the higher-ups. Financials, the ROI of leadership.
This is where we quantify the value of the human wage and the P&Is. And the most powerful metric the sources suggest is the reduction of the cost of no quality, the CNC.
This isn't just lost revenue.
No, it's the cost of rework. We measure the total hours spent by both the leader and the team fixing errors that should have been caught by the P&Is in the first place.
So if that PNIC001 is successful, the CNC, measured in rework hours, should drop drastically. And that shows a direct financial return on that architectural investment. You can literally track the reduction of burnout.
Exactly. Other financial KPIs would be the reduction in HR costs because your talent retention rate goes up, which is directly tied to the health of the human wage. If the system is working, people stay, and the massive cost of replacing them just disappears in the balance sheet.
Okay, next perspective. The client. In this internal ecosystem, the client is the team itself. So this perspective measures the health of the human wage, competence 1.
And this uses anonymous, regular surveys to gauge the team's lived reality. We measure the increase in the autonomy and mastery score. Are people truly feeling agency over their work? We also measure the increase in the psychological safety score. Are they comfortable admitting errors or debating their peers constructively?
And if the autonomy score is low, the leader knows the failure is incompetence too. They need to build more P&Is and delegate more authority. If the psychological safety score is low, the failure is incompetence 3. They haven't created a safe enough container for conflict.
The BSC instantly tells the leader which competency needs the most work. It's diagnostic, it's not judgmental.
Moving to the third area, processes, the robustness of the architecture. This is about measuring how well competence 2 is really working.
Yeah, this assesses the integrity of the ecosystem itself. KPIs here include the simple number of active P&Is, how many recurring decisions are now automated. We also look at the success rate of specific protocols, like PNI C001. How frequently does that escape valve get triggered? A lower trigger rate means you have a more robust P&I.
And the most telling metric in this section, and this one is just revolutionary for a transitioning leader, is the reduction of the Leader Intervention Index, or IRL.
The IRL is the architect leader's nemesis. It measures how many times the leader personally intervened in a decision that should have been handled by an existing P&I or by a delegated team member.
For the hero leader, a high intervention rate is a badge of honor. It means they're indispensable.
Exactly. But for the architect leader, a high IRL is a devastating failure of their system design.
The ultimate goal is to drive that IRL down to as close to 0 as possible. That means the leader has successfully eliminated their own indispensability, which is the hallmark of a truly self-sufficient ecosystem.
And that is a radical shift in personal identity, realizing that your highest honor is making yourself redundant in daily operations. It's tough.
It is. Finally, we look at the growth perspective, the capacity for future sustainability and legacy. This is level 3 of the human wage.
This measures the ability of the system to replicate the leadership function itself.
So what are the KPIs there?
KPIs here would include the rate of ready succession, how many internal people are prepared and trained through the P&Is to step into the next level of management. We'd also measure the increase in the Knowledge Multiplier Index, or IMC. This measures how effective your internal knowledge transfer is, often gauged by the quality and frequency of constructive peer feedback, exactly like the positive reinforcement we built into PNI C001.
So by installing competence 4, leadership stops being reactive, gut-driven firefighting.
Yes.
It becomes a continuous, data-driven cycle of learning and redesign. If the data shows the IRL is creeping up, the leader knows exactly which P&I they need to revisit, rather than just feeling frustrated with their staff.
It provides the data necessary for continuous learning. And that is the definition of sustainable excellence that is completely independent of personal heroism.
This deep dive has really provided a complete blueprint for the elite leader's operating system. It's this shift from the fragile hero to the resilient architect. We've covered the 4 competencies: the philosophy of the human wage, the architecture of zero dependence with P&Is, the engine of constructive conflict, and the measurement of the BSC.
And we just have to reiterate that these are not isolated modules. You can't just pick one. They form a single, deeply interconnected ecosystem. If you try to implement one without the others, the whole system will fail.
Right. Without that bedrock philosophy of the human wage, competence 1, implementing the architecture of the P&Is, just feels like cold, soul-crushing bureaucracy. It crushes level 1 safety.
And without that delegated architecture from competence 2 that provides genuine autonomy, there's no space for necessary constructive conflict. There's just obedience, which leads directly to apathy, a level 2 failure.
And if the team can't manage conflict, competence 3, to debate and challenge ideas safely, they can't co-create or improve the P&Is themselves. That burden just falls right back on the leader.
Which increases the IRL. and confirms their status as the bottleneck.
Finally, without the rigorous measurement of the BSC, competence 4, the leader is just operating blind. They can't diagnose whether the philosophy, the architecture, or the conflict competencies are truly succeeding, or if they're just silently failing. The system just decays.
It does.
The ultimate goal here feels so profound. It's not about making you a slightly better manager of people. It's about transforming you into the designer of a high-performance, self-sustaining ecosystem.
A legacy of enduring infrastructure rather than ephemeral heroism. This pathway lets you achieve exceptional, scalable results that are totally independent of the heroic effort of any single individual.
Which means the true question for any leader in any context, be it business, governance, or even the family unit, is no longer, what should I do in this situation?
Here's where it gets really interesting. The only question that matters for the architect leader is this: what system must I build today that solves this problem forever?
And in the answer to that systemic question resides the difference between a legacy that collapses the moment you step away.
And one that thrives long after you've left the field.
Yeah.